Charles Borromeo, Italian, Carlo Borromeo, Latin, Carolus Borromeus, the 2nd of October 1538 to 3 November 1584, was a cardinal who was Archbishop of Milan from 1564 to 1584. Among the great reformers of the troubled 16th century, Borromeo, with Saint Ignatius of Loyola, Saint Philip Neri, and others, led the movement to combat the inroads of the Protestant Reformation. He was a leading figure during the Counter-Reformation and was responsible for significant reforms in the Catholic Church, including the founding of seminaries for the education of priests. He is honored as a saint in the Catholic Church and his feast day is November 4. Sources: Charles's biography was originally written by 3 of his contemporaries: Agostino Valerio, afterwards Cardinal and Bishop of Verona, and Carlo Bascape, General of the Barnabites, afterwards Bishop of Navarra, who wrote their contributions in Latin, and Pietro Giussano, a priest, who wrote his in Italian. Father Giussano's account was the most detailed of the 3. Early life: Charles was a descendant of nobility. The family of Borromeo was one of the most ancient and wealthy in Lombardy, made famous by several notable men, both in the church and state. The aristocratic Borromeo family's coat of arms included the Borromean rings, sometimes taken to symbolize the Holy Trinity. Charles's father Gilbert was Count of Verona. His mother Margaret was a member of the Milan branch of the House of Medici, the 3rd son in a family of 6 children. He was born in the castle of Verona on Lake Maggiore, 36 miles from Milan, on the 2nd of October 1538. Borromeo received the tonsure when he was about 12 years old. At this time his paternal uncle, Julius Caesar Borromeo, turned over to him the income from the rich Benedictine abbey of Sts. Gratinian and Felin, one of the ancient perquisites of this noble family. In spite of his youth, Charles made plain to his father that all revenues from the abbey beyond what was required to prepare him for a career in the church belonged to the poor and could not be applied to secular use. The young man attended the University of Pavia, where he applied himself to the study of civil and canon law. Due to a slight impediment of speech, he was regarded as slow, yet his thoroughness and industry more than compensated for the handicap. In 1554 his father died, and although he had an elder brother, Count Federico, he was requested by the family to take the management of their domestic affairs. After a time, he resumed his studies, and on 6 December 1559 he earned a doctorate in Utroque, canon and civil law, Rome period. On 25 December 1559, his uncle, Cardinal Giovanni Angelo Medici, was raised to the pontificate as Pope Pius IV. The newly elected pope required his nephew Charles Borromeo to come to Rome, and on 13 January 1560, appointed him protonotary apostolic. Shortly thereafter, on 31 January 1560, the Pope created him cardinal, and thus Charles as Cardinal-nephew was entrusted with both the public and the privy seal of the ecclesiastical state. He was also entrusted in the government of the Papal States and appointed supervisor of the Franciscans, Carmelites and Knights of Malta. During his 4 years in Rome, Charles lived in austerity, compelled the personnel in the Roman Curia to wear black and established an academy of learned persons, the Academy of the Vatican Knights, publishing their memoirs as the Noctes Vaticanae. Charles committed to organize the third and last section of the Council of Trent. In 1562–63, he took a large share in the creation of the Tridentine Catechism, Catechismus Romanus. In 1561, Borromeo founded and endowed a college at Pavia, today known as Almo Collegio Borromeo, which he dedicated to Saint Justina of Padua. On 19 November 1562, his older brother, Federico, suddenly died. His family urged Charles to leave the church to marry and have children, so that the family name would not become extinct. But he decided not to leave the ecclesiastic state. His brother's death, along with his contacts with the Jesuits and the Theatines and the example of bishops such as Bartholomew of Braga, were the causes of a conversion of Charles towards a more strict and operative Christian life, and his aim became to put into practice the dignity and duties of the bishop as drafted by the recent Council of Trent. Archbishop of Milan. Charles was appointed administrator of the Archdiocese of Milan on 7 February 1560. After his decision to put into practice the role of bishop, he decided to be ordained priest. 4 September 1563, and on 7 December 1563 he was consecrated bishop in the Sistine Chapel by Cardinal Giovanni Serbelloni. Charles was formally appointed Archbishop of Milan on 12 May 1564 after the former Archbishop, Ippolito II d'Este, waived his claims on that archbishopric, but he was only allowed by the Pope to leave Rome 1 year later. Charles made his formal entry into Milan as Archbishop on 23 September 1565. Reform Program. Acta Ecclesiae Mediolanensis. After the death of his uncle, Pius IV, 1566, Charles contributed materially to suppressing the cabals of the conclave. Before Charles went to Milan, while he was overseeing reform in Rome, a nobleman remarked that the latter city was no longer a place to enjoy oneself or to make a fortune. Carlo Borromeo has undertaken to remake the city from top to bottom, he said, predicting dryly that the reformer's enthusiasm would lead him to correct the rest of the world once he has finished with Rome. Quote, subsequently, he devoted himself wholly to the reformation of his diocese. It had deteriorated in practice owing to the 80-year absence of previous archbishops. When Charles arrived in Milan, he faced a daunting task. Milan was the largest archdiocese in Italy at the time, with more than 3,000 clergy and 800,000 people. Both its clergy and laity had drifted from church teaching. The selling of indulgences and ecclesiastical positions was prevalent. Monasteries were full of disorder. Many religious were lazy, ignorant, and debauched. Charles made numerous pastoral visits and restored dignity to divine service, in conformity with the decrees of the Council of Trent, which suggested simplifying church interiors. He cleared the cathedral of ornate tombs, rich ornaments, banners and arms. He did not even spare the monuments of his own relatives. He divided the nave of the church into 2 compartments to separate the sexes at worship. He extended his reforms to the collegiate churches, monasteries and even to the confraternities of penitents, particularly that of St. John the Baptist. This group was to attend to prisoners and those condemned to death, to give them help and support. Charles believed that abuses in the church arose from ignorant clergy. Among his most important actions, he established seminaries, colleges and communities for the education of candidates for holy orders. His emphasis on Catholic learning greatly increased the preparation of men for priesthood and benefited their congregations. In addition, he founded the Fraternity of Oblates of St. Ambrose, a society of secular men who did not take orders, but devoted themselves to the church and followed a discipline of monastic prayers and study. They provided assistance to parishes where ordered by the church. The new archbishop's efforts for catechesis and the instruction of youth were especially fruitful, initiating the work of the Confraternity for Christian Doctrine and the first Sunday school classes. His reforms of the diocese, in accordance with the decrees of the council, were dramatic and effective. Borromeo faced staunch opposition of several religious orders. particularly that of the Humiliati, Brothers of Humility, a decayed penitential order which, although reduced to about 170 members, owned some 90 monasteries. Some members of that society formed a conspiracy against his life, and a shot was fired at him in the archiepiscopal chapel. His survival was considered miraculous. In 1576 there was famine at Milan due to crop failures, and later came an outbreak of the plague. The city's trade fell off, and along with it the people's source of income. The governor and many members of the nobility fled the city, but the bishop remained, to organize the care of those who were stricken and to minister to the dying. He called together the superiors of all the religious communities in the diocese, and won their cooperation. Borromeo tried to feed 60,000 to 70,000 people daily. He used up his own funds and went into debt to provide food for the hungry. Finally, he wrote to the governor, and shamed him into coming back to his post. Charles had also been involved in English affairs when he assisted Pius IV. Many English Catholics had fled to Italy at this time because of the persecutions under Queen Elizabeth I. He gave important pastoral attention to English Catholics who fled to Italy to escape the new laws against the Catholic faith. Saint Edmund Campion, a Jesuit, along with St. Ralph Sherwin, visited him at Milan in 1580 on the way to England. They stayed with him for 8 days, talking at length with him every night after dinner. A Welshman, Dr. Griffith Roberts, served as his canon theologian, and an Englishman, Thomas Goldwell, as vicar general. The archbishop carried on his person a small picture of St. John Fisher, who, with St. Thomas More, had been martyred for the faith during the reign of Henry VIII, and for whom he held a great veneration. Suppression of heresy. Though the Diet of Elans of 1524 and 1526 had proclaimed freedom of worship in the Republic of the Three Leagues, Charles repressed Protestantism in the Swiss valleys. The Catholic Encyclopedia relates, in November 1583, he began a visitation as apostolic visitor of all the cantons of Switzerland and the Grisons, leaving the affairs of his diocese in the hands of Monsignor Owen Lewis, his vicar general. He began in the Messolina Valley. Here not only was there heresy to be fought, but also witchcraft and sorcery. And at Roveredo it was discovered that the provost, or rector, was the foremost in sorceries. During his pastoral visit to the region, 150 people were arrested for practicing witchcraft. 11 women and the provost were condemned to be burned alive. Reacting to the pressure of the Protestant Reformation, Borromeo encouraged Ludwig Pfeffer in his development of the Golden League, but did not live to see its formation in 1586. Based in Lucerne, the organization, also called the Borromean League, linked activities of several Swiss Catholic cantons of Switzerland, which became the center of Catholic Counter-Reformation efforts. This organization was determined to expel heretics and burn some people at the stake. It created severe strains in the civil administration of the Confederation, and caused the breakup of Appenzell Canton along religious lines. Controversy in Last Days. An austere, dedicated, humorless and uncompromising personality is the way that a biographer, an admiring biographer, describes Charles. Charged with implementing the reforms dictated by the Council of Trent, Charles had to be tough, and his toughness brought him into conflict with secular leaders, priests, and even the Pope himself. He met with much opposition to his reforms. The governor of the province, and many of the senators, addressed complaints to the courts of Rome and Madrid. They were apprehensive that the cardinal's ordinances would encroach upon the civil jurisdiction. He successfully attacked his Jesuit confessor, Giovanni Battista Ribera, who, with other members of the College of Milan, was found to be guilty of unnatural offences. This action increased Borromeo's enemies within the Church. Charles's manifold labours and austerities appear to have shortened his life. Travels in his diocese, especially in the difficult Alpine country, had weakened the bishop's constitution. In 1584, during his annual retreat at Monte Veraglio, he was stricken with an intermittent fever and ague, and on returning to Milan grew rapidly worse. After receiving the last sacraments, the beloved bishop died quietly on the 4th of November at the age of 46. Veneration. Following his death, popular devotion to Charles arose quickly and continued to grow. The Milanese celebrated his anniversary as though he were already a saint, and supporters in a number of cities collected documentation to support his canonization. In 1602 Pope Paul V beatified Charles. In 1604 his case was sent on to the Congregation of Rites. On 1 November 1610, Paul V canonized Charles. 3 years later, the Church added his feast to the general Roman calendar for celebration on 4 November, along with Anselm of Lucca. He is one of only 2 cardinal-nephews to have been canonized. Iconography. Borromeo's emblem is the Latin word humilitas, humility, which is a portion of the Borromeo shield. He is usually represented in art in his robes, barefoot, carrying the cross as archbishop, a rope around his neck, one hand raised in blessing, thus recalling his work during the plague. Legacy. The position which Charles held in Europe was remarkable. He is venerated as a saint of learning and the arts. The mass of correspondence both to and by him testifies to how often his opinion was sought. The popes under whom he served sought his advice. The Catholic sovereigns of Europe, Henry III of France, Philip II of Spain, Mary, Queen of Scots, and others showed how they valued his influence. His brother cardinals wrote in praise of his virtues. Cardinal Valerio of Verona said of him that Borromeo was, to the well-born, a pattern of virtue. To his brother cardinals an example of true nobility. Cardinal Borromeus styled him a second Ambrose, whose early death, lamented by all good men, inflicted great loss on the Church. Quote, late in the 16th or at the beginning of the 17th century, Catholics in England circulated among themselves a life of Saint Charles. Besides the Noctes Vaticanae, to which he appeared to have contributed, Borromeo's written legacy consisted only of some homilies, discourses and sermons, with a collection of letters. Borromeo's sermons have been translated into many languages. Contrary to Borromeo's last wishes, the Duomo di Milano created a memorial crypt to honor him at the church. His nephew, Federico Borromeo, 1564–1631, was Archbishop of Milan from 1595 and, furthering Carlo's support for Catholic learning, in 1609 founded the Ambrosian Library in that city. He donated a tremendous collection of art and literature to the library. Borromeo was crucial in furthering the career of composer Orfeo Vecchi. His relative Federico Borromeo and admirers commissioned a statue 20 meters high that was erected on the hill above Verona, as they regarded him an important leader of the Counter-Reformation. The famous church of San Carlo al Quattro Fontane in Rome was dedicated in his honor. Charles is one of only 4 people mentioned at the beginning of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, citing them as responsible for the Council of Trent, which gave way to the modern-day Catechism. The others mentioned a street, Peter Canisius, St. Torribius of Mongrovejo and St. Roberto Bellarmine. The city and county of St. Charles, Missouri, are named for Borromeo. Also, a Brazilian city was named after him, named in Portuguese São Carlos. The parish of St. Charles, Louisiana is named for Borromeo. Karlskirche, Vienna, Austria. Carolus Borromeus, Antwerp, Belgium. Mission San Carlos Borromeo de Carmelo in Carmel by the Sea, California. Cathedral of San Carlos Borromeo in nearby Monterey, California, and the cities of St. Charles, Missouri and San Carlos City, Negros Occidental are all named in his honor. A number of seminaries bear his name and are honored by his patronage. St. Charles Borromeo Seminary of the Archdiocese of Košice, in Košice, Slovakia. St. Charles Borromeo Seminary of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, United States. St. Charles Borromeo Seminary of the Catholic Diocese of El Paso, Texas, United States. San Carlos Seminary of the Archdiocese of Manila in Makati City, Philippines. San Carlos Major Seminary of the Archdiocese of Cebu, University of San Carlos in Cebu City, Philippines. Colegio San Carlos in Bogotá, Colombia. St. Charles Borromeo Major Seminary of Nyakibanda in Rwanda. St. Charles's Seminary in Perth, Australia. Roman Catholic schools, parishes and hospital named for St. Charles Borromeo include those in Australia, New South Wales, Canada, Toronto, Ontario, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Nigeria, Lagos, Philippines, Cebu City, Poland, Krakow, Warsaw, Senegal, Island of Gorée, United Kingdom, London, Paisley, United States, Ahoskie, North Carolina, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Arlington, Virginia, Bayport, Minnesota, Bloomington, California, Bloomington, Indiana, Brooklyn, New York, Burlington, Wisconsin, Cassville, Wisconsin, Sheboygan, Michigan, Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, Cinnaminson, New Jersey, Cleveland, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Destrian, Louisiana, Bensonville, Illinois, Du Bois, Illinois, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Frankston, Texas, Heartland, Wisconsin, Kettering, Ohio, Lima, Ohio, Livermore, California, Meredith, New Hampshire, Bellows Falls, Vermont, Montgomery, New Jersey, Nederland, Texas, Newport, Michigan, North Hollywood, California, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Orlando, Florida, Peoria, Arizona, Pikesville, Maryland, Port Charlotte, Florida, Portland, Oregon, Rochester, New York, Sacramento, California, San Diego, California, San Francisco, California, Staten Island, New York, Syracuse, New York, Tacoma, Washington, Waverly, New South Wales, Kingsland, Texas and Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Also, a castle, fortress, in Margarita Island, Venezuela is named after him. See also, Guasta lines, silent preaching, sources and external links. This article incorporates text from a publication now in the public domain. Chisholm, Hugh, ed. 1911. Borromeo, Carlo. Encyclopaedia Britannica. 11th ed. Cambridge University Press. Asala. Documenti circa la vita e la gesta di Borromeo. 4 vols. Milan. 1857–1859. Chamoun Sylvain. Histoire de Saint Charles Borromeo. Milan. 1884. A cantono. Un grande riformatore del secolo XVI. Florence. 1904. Borromeus in Herzog Hauck. Relencyclopédie. Leipzig. 1897. University of San Carlos. Cebu City, Philippines. Official site. St. Charles Borromeo Seminary, Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Pietro Canetta. Biography of Carlo Borromeo, in Italian. Magazzino Storico Verbanese. Fabiola Giancotti. per ragioni di salute. San Carlo Borromeo nel quarto centenario della canonizzazione 1610-2010. ISBN 9788877708922. Il Club di Milano. Spirali 2010. Colonnade statue in St. Peter's Square. St. Charles Borromeo. Aphorisms 1561-1584. ISBN 9788897618133. Il Club di Milano. 2012. Literature by and about Charles Borromeo in the German National Library Catalogue. Epistolario di San Carlo. Digital edition of the manuscripts and letters of Carlo Borromeo. Website of St. Charles Church. Volders in Tyrol. Birgit Heskikit. Architecture Theorie der Italianisken Renaissance. Die Instructions fabricae et Superlectalis Ecclesiastici des Carlo Borromeo. Saarbrücken. 1999. Borromeo. Carlo. 1538-1584. In Salvador Miranda. The Cardinals of the Holy Roman Church. Online at FIU. Edu. Website of Florida International University. Retrieved 29 September 2012.